Hello, everyone. So this is our last class where we covered how to write introduction, right? As I said, if you see percentage, use proportion, share figure, number, how many we have. So this is how you paraphrase, how you write years differently. So introduction is all about writing fast, and it doesn't. These are the examples we have written. It doesn't. How can I say? The introduction doesn't count, or you don't get your score based on your introduction. It mostly comes from overview. And today we'll cover overview. For the first time, I prepared certain things. So first of all, overview paragraph, you should take the biggest, you should take the highest, lowest, and big change. So these are the things you should cover in your overview, regardless of the graph. You cannot mention data, you cannot mention percentages, only the big things, detailed. You cannot write detailed, it should be general. By detailed, I mean you should cover as much as you can. So this is the first sentence we use, and which is opposing trends. For example, A increased, B decreased, or you can say while A increased, B decreased, or although A increased, B decreased. The green one is the most preferred, even for task 2. So next one is exception. Population increased in all given countries, comma, very important to have comma. Without comma, it is considered, I would say, minor mistake, but still mistake. Comma, except in country A, or population increase in all given countries with the exception of country A. So you use except or with the exception of. Next one, only one. Japan was the only country to experience a decline. So this is just the structure we use. And then last one is A increased, B decreased. Instead of saying increased, decreased, yeah, this is very generic, I would say. You can say A increased, but the reverse was seen in B. And these are the basics, right? I will probably share this file too. So there you go. You can take screenshot, take a note of that. So these are the structures we're going to use. There is more, but the rest we're going to learn using the examples themselves. So here's the first graph, which was given very recently to one of the candidates. And how do you analyze? So when it's line graph, look at the first year and look at the ranking. Okay, you should look at the ranking. What is ranking? So here, this is the first, number one. This is the least, right? So expenditures on science. Okay, most money was spent on health, least money on general science. And this increased over the period, actually increased, not increased. So it used to be like probably like 7, and then it became over 20. So from 7 to 20 is basically threefold increase. So as you can see, and it stayed as number one. So health was number one, it is number one. So then the yellow one is the least popular, least spent, received the least amount of money, and it is the same in the end. Then we have these two. So the orange one increased, green increased, black decreased. So black was the only one to decrease. Others increased, but this one was the lowest. This one was the highest. But these two increased. So we're going to group them together. And that's it. That's basically it. And we may mention the peak if we want. And that makes it perfect. And that's how we cover. And this is the example. So overall, the expenditures rose for all sectors. This is very important. But is it true? No, not really. This so-called other is decreased. So except for others. So whenever you say exception, it's very important to mention comma and then non-defining relative clause, which saw a marginal decline over the period after some fluctuations in the mid-period. Exactly. After some fluctuations, it saw a decline. So black was the only one to decline, and this is how you write. In general, health was the predominant field that received most funds, especially in 2004, experiencing most notable growth. There you go. While the investments on other fields were modestly increased by the end of the period, with general science remaining to be the least spent. So I have the lowest and I have the highest as well. So that's how you cover. All right, this is our next graph. Okay, spendings, again, spendings, 18-year-olds on one country on 5 different products. Okay, how much these young people spend on these. This is basically a small line graph. As you can see, food was the number one, book was the least spent. So they spend most money on food, very, I would say, the least money on books. This increased, this decreased. So we see the opposing trends. Smartphones increased marginally, became the second. Toiletries also increased, but there is nothing special about toiletries. And there you go. Overall, the spending habits of youngsters changed. So you start with some sort of a general sentence like all increased, all decreased. That's better. Notably, while most money was spent on food in both years, experiencing modest growth. So I said most money was spent. I'm using passive voice. The opposite was true for books, which saw a substantial decline. What the substantial? As you can see, I mentioned how it happened with adverbs. This growth was modest. Modest means little bit. Substantial means significant. 18, 20-year-olds significantly increased their spendings on smartphones, making it the second most prominent by the end of the period. The expenditures on toiletries also rose marginally, whereas the money spent on clothes remained unchanged. So I mentioned everything in detail, I would say, and this is how you write detailed overview, and it doesn't get better than this probably. You don't have to mention toiletries in this case. Let's write one more, okay? Let's look at this one. I don't have example for this, so we're gonna write this together. I've never seen this before. So the graph shows Japanese average monthly salary yen from 1953 to 73. So prices and the prices of black and white television and colored television during the same period. So this is the salary of people. This is interesting, which is increasing, which increased from like 20 something to 180. That's a big increase. The price of black and white TV, and colored. So the colored one became cheaper. Black and white was cheap and became very cheap. This is an interesting graph, but let's write the overview. All right, so overall, mm, overall, let's say it's clear. No. Overall, the prices for those types of TV declined, while the average monthly salary increased over the period. Now we mentioned the ranking. So this one was so as you can see, until 1958, we only had black and white option, and then this emerged. So which means, so okay, so this increase from 180 to the starting point of this one. So, so increased over the period, not just increased, I would say substantially increased over the period. Mm, declined noticeably, right? Noticeably. Let's mention this. And then we mention until 1958, you can say black and white TV was the only option, then which saw a was the only option. Okay. Before the emergence of the colored versions. Before the emergence of colored options. Okay, this is something that we didn't cover, but this is interesting. But yeah, colored versions. Yes, of the colored versions, which were much more expensive. So the prices for them also fell. Can I say halved? Yep, for them. Almost halved by the end of the period. Well, I think this is the perfect overview. I don't know why. So the price for both types of TV declined noticeably, while the average monthly salary substantially increased over the period until 1958. I think we have comma here. Black and white TV was the only option before the emergence of the colored versions, which were much more expensive. Not just expensive, which were much more expensive, meaning that it was way more expensive. So the prices, the prices for them almost halved by the end of the period. Well, that's it. Yeah, that's a perfect. This is as good as it gets, probably. We could have mentioned it a bit differently, but I think this does the job perfectly. So the next one is this one. Okay, the chart shows the number of films produced in 5 countries. Okay, so we have the numbers. So these are the number of films, and these are the countries, right? Number of films by 5 countries. We don't have the country names. Okay, so country A produced most films, but it fall. The least number of films were produced in country E, but generally all of them produced very few films. This one increased, this one kind of decreased, and this one is increasing. This one experienced the biggest increase, actually, and it became the second most common in 2009. Okay, let's go. So let's write an overview. Overall, the numbers. Look for the trend, which is true for every country. So we have country A and E, which saw declines, while the others experienced varying degrees of increase. So the numbers increased in all countries except in country A and D, which saw declines, right? Which saw increased in all countries in varying degrees, right? Varying degrees means this is very important because the increases were not stable for all of them, which saw modest declines, right? Modest declines. Modest means, not so significant. Now, mhm. Mhm. Right, notably, country A produced uh, the highest number of films and remained in the leading position despite a marginal fall by 2009. Similarly, oh, this looks like paragraph, but I'm not really liking this, but it's okay. Okay. So similarly, country B country B also closely followed this after a substantial rise from the year 2008. The numbers in other countries in other countries were much lower right? However, all right, this wasn't easy actually. So overall, the numbers increased in all countries in varying degrees, except in country A and D, which saw modest declines. Okay, I mentioned that A and D experienced declines, so that's not bad. Let's not write other countries. Let's write in countries Uh, in countries C, D, and E. Okay. C, comma, D, comma, and E. Now, this comma is optional. You can put it or not. So basically, it depends. It's called Oxford comma. AI and GPTs really like putting this, but it's optional, honestly. But after C, it's mandatory. You must put comma. Notably, country A produced the highest number of films and remained in the leading position despite a marginal fall by 2009. Similarly, country B also closely followed after a substantial rise from the year 2008. However, the numbers in countries C, D, and E were much lower. Yeah, this is beautiful. And let's look at this one. This is probably the last one, yes, and it's table. So again, I'm not really following the structure I gave initially because the graphs are a bit different, but most graphs you see in the exam, or usually the usual ones they usually follow the script, the textbook version of overviews. The chart shows the number of cars per 1,000 people in 5 European countries. Okay, number of cars per 1,000 people. So let's look at the average. Average is the first one you should look at. Okay, we have 5 countries again, and on average, this has 680 cars, this has 740 cars, this has 730 cars. Okay. And this is a line graph, interestingly. So country A, the car numbers increased and then decreased. Here, it takes more time to analyze than writing. So this one is increased, then decreased. Here, increased, decreased. Okay, I see similarity already. This one, stable. So this one increased and increased. Here, on average, increased and decreased, of course. Okay. So which one has the highest number of cars? Here. Here we have the highest numbers in country 5. And here again, it's country 5. The lowest number. The lowest number is country A. And yes, it's country A. Others were somewhere in between. This one remained stable. Yep, that's our overview. So there you go. Overall, overall, the number of cars increased increased okay, this something went wrong, right? Okay, there you go. Okay, somehow it's jumping. Let me there you go. Okay. So overall, the numbers in all countries, the number of cars in increased in all the given countries, by 2010. So which one was the exception? The only exception was, I guess, um, except in country 4, which experienced so the experienced a stable, which didn't, right, experience any change in numbers over the whole throughout the period, right? In numbers throughout period. Throughout the period, notably, so okay. On average, all the countries, all the given notably, okay, increased in all the given 2000 before a before a noticeable decline, before a noticeable decline by the end of period. Okay, now that looks beautiful, which didn't explain any change in number throughout the period. Notably, on average, okay, that I don't need notably. On average, okay, let's write notably first, right? So this one is a bit harder than I expected it to be. So notably, country one had the least number of cars over the period, while the country five, while the opposite was true for country five, which had the highest numbers. I don't need on average. Now here on average. Okay, it took a lot of engineering. So on average, the number of cars increased in all the given countries by 2000 before a noticeable decline by the end of the period, except in country four, which didn't experience any change in numbers throughout the period. Notably, country one had the least number of cars over the period, while the opposite was true for country five, which had the highest numbers. This is beautiful. Honestly, it took me a while to write. I actually struggled. I wasn't even speaking while writing, but so again, I mentioned the lowest, I mentioned the highest, I mentioned the average, and I mentioned something that's related to all of the countries. I mentioned exceptions. So this is basically the textbook definition of an overview. And this is exactly what I wanted to cover today. So let's look at what we have learned. So this, you can read this, And we have written this together, and let's look at the theory. So again, you can write opposing trends, exceptions, only one, and the reverse was true. And I think I covered all of them today. And practice makes it perfect. One thing, you must mention as much key detail as possible. I also have shown how you eliminate, how you don't write these minor details, and how to focus on the significant changes, how to highlight them, how to mention such, oddities. And yeah, this is what you probably need more for overviews. You can analyze them later. I will attach the file, and you can also take the screenshot or watch the video again and again.